Well, hello to everybody out there. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this conference. It's a great honour. Of course, I wish I could be there in Tenerife. Hopefully, maybe one day I'll be able to get there. But thank you very much for inviting me. And my talk is going to be on contemporary community music, practice, ideas and understandings. And I'm going to be exploring this idea of community music. And I hope that there's going to be clear relevance to issues of this conference, namely ideas surrounding inclusion and participation. So this here is the general structure of my presentation. I'm going to start with some opening remarks. I'm going to kind of be reflecting on my or part of my story. I'm going to contextualize community music, look at some of its practice, think about some of its ideas, its impacts, and maybe what maybe some future things as well. So here's a picture of me playing the guitar at 17. And, you know, I was never given access to music education in a formal sense. My early music education experiences were very frustrating. They felt elitist. They felt that people didn't value my own musical and cultural expression. There was a kind of real dichotomy in those times around rock music. As you can see, I'm a rock musician there, and classical music and punk music, etc. So there really wasn't a provision. There really wasn't an access to music education. And this was about economics and also class. There was no real opportunity, but I played a lot and I was involved in a lot in music, in which we might call now informal music learning, like garage band culture, oral copying from recordings, etc. I really wanted to study music. I wanted to go further in this. But when I attempted to do so, it was really a humiliating experience. And the gatekeepers, basically, those university or college teachers were saying no, to me, really. And I felt, although I wasn't able to articulate it quite this way, but it did feel unjust. It felt unfair. But, you know, I grew up through the spirit of punk rock. And in a way, and here's a diagram from a famous kind of do-it-yourself magazine in those days called Sniffing Glue. And you can see this is a chord, this is another chord, this is the third now, form a band. So it was this idea in a way of access, of participation, of anyone can get involved. And this idea of punk, sort of one might call punk pedagogy, I've taken into my professional career. And broadly, it's issues surrounding disruption, surrounding individual empowerment, the idea of ownership, of social responsibility, openness, marginality. And also, I go about with a healthy suspicion of the establishment. Well, fast forward for a good number of years, and I'm involved now in what I call community music, or my community music project. And this project has really given me opportunities to explore some of those things that I felt back in those early times of my teenage years, let's say. And I think that the questions that surround my project, my overarching kind of intellectual endeavor, are ideas around what makes community music practice distinctive, where is community music happening and what does it look like, and why is community music important? And in order to introduce you to community music, I want to just show you 9 pictures, and I want to read you one sentence against each picture. And I'd like you to look at the picture and just think about the sentences here. So this is picture number 1. A community music concert program in Tel Aviv, Israel, addresses the issue of diversity and difference in an area of conflict and war. In the north of England, an experimental community music group works with the whole community to build new musical instruments from scrap material to promote recycling and sustainable living. In a Brazilian favela, where the death rate for young people is high, a community wind band works in conjunction with a non-government agency to provide a safe environment to learn how to play and how to teach music. In South Africa, community music facilitators work with a non-profit organisation and a university to promote active music making within communities that suffered through some of the most repressive and violent periods in apartheid history. Performers in an American community choir comprises of inmates from a local correctional facility describe how singing brings meaning to their lives. In Australia, music students collaborate with First Peoples musicians and community elders on a community service learning program designed to promote intercultural reconciliation, collaboration, and both ways learning through community music making. In Penang, young people of diverse ethnicities engage in a community music theatre project that promotes peace building and alternative narratives about history and social relationships and aims to bring about cultural change. In Rome's northeastern suburbs, known for its economic difficulties, a community music program promotes health and well-being in children and their parents through the experience of making music in groups. And finally, the noise is deafening as 70 amateur drummers parade through the streets of a Scottish city. As these snapshots of community music from around the world suggest, the field of community music has become a global phenomenon. The growing internationalization of the field has brought with it insights from cultural contexts that have both expanded and challenged acceptive approaches, priorities, and ideas within the field. Likewise, with the increase of scholarship and academic courses in community music, the number of people engaging in it has significantly increased worldwide. These emerging voices, agendas, and contexts indicate that the field is continuing to expand, diversify, and mature. In other words, community music as a field has come of age. As a practice welded so closely to the environment in which it takes place, the growth and development of community music has happened in different contexts for different reasons. As such, the term community music can be understood in a variety of ways, reflecting a myriad of possible contexts and musical situations. Set within a broad notion of music education, community musicians place emphasis on inclusive music participation. Their practice is often an expression of cultural democracy, and musicians who work this way are focused on the practical concerns of making and creating music, musical opportunities for people of all ages and abilities. As a system of support that is respectful and celebratory toward diverse communities, musicians that work under the banner of cultural democracy do so by enabling historically excluded voices to be heard whilst claiming no superiority or special status. In continuing dialogue with people that they work with, community musicians negotiate musical journeys through facilitatory group processes. So these are 5 words that I use to kind of describe community music practice. They're kind of like my elevator pitch, if you would like. The idea of people, places, participation, inclusion, and diversity. So people. Music is one of the distinctive aspects of being human, placing participants alongside community musicians as co-authors and collaborators encourages journeying together towards transformative musical experiences. Places. The context is paramount and becomes a pivot for music making, critical inquiry and conversation. Participation. Creating opportunities for active music participation forms the heart of community music. This means those that work in this area seek to understand and increase accessible pathways that lead towards meaningful musical engagement. Inclusion. Community music emphasizes the importance of making connections amongst people across issues and over time. By encouraging expansive and ongoing frameworks for interaction, community musicians seek to create engaged populations and communities of practice. And finally, diversity. Integral to community music is the celebration of difference that can only take place in safe, positive, and nurturing environments. With different funding structures and education systems, community music has grown up and developed in very different parts of the world, and it's reflected by contextual situations, hence the idea of places and context being really key to its practice. And also it's grown up in different ways because of the different needs of people. So here, for example, it's just a kind of list of projects that I've been involved in and experienced in a whole range of different countries, and each of them have their different inflections. I would love to see Spain there one time, and maybe we can make that happen.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
More Music is a community music and education charity. We've been going for 20 years. We make music every week with hundreds of people, whether they're old, young, tiny, whether they've got no skill and they're just starting, or whether they're really fantastic musicians who are on a path towards stardom.
I started More Music like a year ago and I couldn't play anything. But now I play drums in a band and I play guitar and I write my own songs and stuff. So
I don't know what I'd be doing if I hadn't gone there. I certainly wouldn't have gone to uni and done music, I don't think.
You don't have to have an ability or a talent to get involved here. You just have want to be with people. It's very social.
About inspiring people through music and giving them confidence to take chances in life and to achieve and to go somewhere with their lives.
I'm a firm believer that if you can build communities and people can find a home within their communities, not just the individuals, but those places themselves grow and become more positive places for everybody who lives there.
I used to be a primary school teacher, so I'm quite interested in children getting involved in music. And it's great to see the children getting involved. They get so much out of it. A little lad in age probably 6, I think. And there's me at the grand old age of something over 60. And we're all just part of the group. And that's great.
it's one of them.
Yeah, that was a small clip of a project called More Music in Morecambe. It's a UK-based project. So I would like to just sort of talk to you and illustrate some of the ideas through some of the practice. So that's some kind of a typical United Kingdom-based organization that has a lot of outreach, workshop and inclusive music activities that flow out of a building. This image that we see here now is of Mary Cohen, and she does a lot of work in correctional facilities in the United States, and you can see that she's conducting a choir here, and you would have seen an image of that just earlier on at one of those 9 images I showed you. And she works in prisons with inmates. And what's interesting here, and you can see by the different colored T-shirts there, that actually she's managed to create a situation where people from the outside also come into the prison and sing with the inmates. So it's another example of of community music. I mentioned some work here with First Peoples. This has been some fabulous work going on with Indigenous groups. This is an Australian group, but there's also work happening with First Nations in Canada, really tackling issues of decolonization and real kind of contemporary themes of our time, where music creates a situation where silenced voices, historically silenced voices, can be heard by creating participation opportunities. This is a great project that happens in Harlem, in New York, and it is in a school, but the school struggled with getting people involved in music, although there was a real recognition that people were involved in music all the way across the city, and by creating a samba band, which lent itself to generating an open ensemble environment. And so you've got a lot more people involved in music, and the samba band as a structure becomes a useful device. Some work happening here from a Norwegian team in a Palestinian refugee camp in South Lebanon, which also challenges a lot of ideas around cultural democracy, etc. But again, it's a space where young people can come and be involved in music making in a safe environment. But it does, as you might imagine, this particular context does raise a lot of challenges to the work. And I want to also just mention, as I think I just talked very briefly already about the idea of the work happening in different countries. You can see there that the Italian community music book that only came out a week or so ago, and the German one there. And some of these ideas of inclusion have really flowed over to like international structures, like the International Society of Music Education, for example. The idea of participation and inclusion was at the heart of its conference in 2018 that was held in Azerbaijan, in Baku, or Baku in Azerbaijan. So thinking about the central questions that have preoccupied my project, which is what makes community music distinctive, how can we understand it, why is it important, and what are the ideas and how they manifest in action, it's worth just reflecting that the project really started historically as a kind of active intervention, really the idea of intervening, and it comes from a social activist perspective. That idea that there was not just opportunities for people. And at the heart of this is this idea that you've heard me say a few times now, this idea of cultural democracy. And so this is very different to what was being used certainly in England at the time, with the opera companies, with the symphonic houses, with the concert halls, which was more of a democratization of culture. And what the democratization of culture really considers was opening up the doors of these bastions of high culture, and through the goodness of people's hearts, in a way, and I'm being British sarcastic here, inviting people in and providing opportunities for the people from the outside to come in and witness culture. Now, cultural democracy flips that round and says, yes, we recognize that those things exist and that they're important, but we want our cultures to be valued equally as well, i.e. not all the money from central government just supporting the ballet companies and the opera companies and the symphony orchestras, but what about supporting the cultures, our local cultures, the things that we do, the things that are important to us. So cultural democracy in that sense is a challenge and a call for action. And then there's that phrase, well, we don't need culture, we already have it. In other words, as human beings, we develop our own culture. It's not just for the elite, for those that can afford it. So at the heart of the work that I'm talking about is this notion of cultural democracy, and it comes from like a social activist point of view. And in practice, what does it look like in practice? Well, community music in practice takes places in these ideas of workshops. If we think about theoretical work from Deleuze, for example, these deterritorialized spaces, the idea of creating new events and creating new modes of experiences and different forms of judgment. And if we think of it in terms of postmodern theory from Lyotard, disrupting pre-existing frames and creating opportunities for possible of emergence of new forms and new voices. So the idea in a way is challenging more traditional notions of teaching. So ideas from parler frere, pedagogy from the oppressed, for example, would be at the heart of this work. And facilitation would be important. So we're again pushing away or challenging the ideas of teaching, this idea of banking knowledge, where it would be much more a case of working alongside people, journeying together, you might say, negotiated curriculum, if you're going to look at it in pedagogic terms, non-formal education. And here, this idea of facilitation, this idea to make easy, to guide. And this comes with a set of skills. And one might say a facilitator is a self-reflective process person who has a variety of human processes, technical skills and knowledges, together with a variety of experiences to assist groups of people to journey together to reach their goals. So it becomes something that can be very much kind of taught. It has a pedagogic backdrop to it as well. So a workshop and facilitation are strategic approaches to music leaderships, and this idea of invention, this idea of creating new music is clearly important. So improvisation, these types of things you'll see in community music work, where music leaders, music facilitators will support people to develop their own work by creating inclusive and participating things. So one of the things that I've certainly developed, if you read any of my work, is this idea of community music as an act of hospitality. And hospitality starts with this idea of the welcome. So the idea of welcoming people into your space. But this is always linked with the idea of the call. So the idea of being people asking that they want to do music, much like I did back in my teenage years, as I put. But instead of saying no, there's this idea of welcoming people into the space. So the act of hospitality is a theoretical frame that I've developed. If you're interested, you can always pick up some of my work to do that. But it's not an idealistic idea. It's not just something that suggests that you can make, that it's easy just to create open, accessible spaces, because it isn't easy. And sometimes it's not possible. So there's a heart towards an unconditional hospitality, a hospitality that says, yes, we want to, anyone who wants to be involved can be involved. But of course, we work in the real world, and the real world is conditional with resources, with money, with all those things. So community music as an act of hospitality, or creating these participatory spaces, an act of hospitality, is always a negotiation between what's possible and what's a challenge. But at the heart of it, I think it's very simple, and it's a chance to say yes. So rather than gatekeepers saying no, what would it be like if we all started trying to say yes? It's a challenge for sure, but maybe it's something we want to take on. And I hope people engaging in this lecture now are I'm sure people that really would like to say yes. So community music, as we move to the last part of the talk now, community music is really developed a sense of field now. So it's really developing as a field. And there's scholarship. And for instance, I've been leading the International Journal of Community Music 13 years now. It started 13 years ago. And if you engage in this journal, you know, there's things around criminal justice, health and well-being. There's special country issues on Norway and Germany. And there's a whole kind of a range of things within this book that are very broad and worldwide. So there's a real defense of scholarship there. There's also community music is really embedded in the International Society of Music Education. And in fact, a few years ago, I was president of the organization. I was involved in the leadership there for 6 years and president for 2 years. And I led the Baku conference in Azerbaijan. So those ideas that I'm talking about now, participation, inclusion, etc., are really now part of the discussion in broader education circles. So it's a very exciting time to be involved in issues around music and participation. This model here just suggests, it's a model from one of my books, but it just suggests that community music now has a seat around a number of tables. So I'm just suggesting things like music education I've spoke about, but also ethnomusicology, also music therapy, and in Germanic speaking countries, certainly social work as well has been an important part there. So it's something to explore if you're interested in. And community music has also become real part of the literature. So in recent times, and probably beginning with the book I put out in 2012, Community Music in Theory and Practice with Oxford University Press, and then more recently, 2018, the Oxford Handbook of Community Music, you can see now that literature and support for this way of working is growing all the time. So why is this work important? From an ethnomusicological perspective, music is a distinctive human practice and a fundamental aspect of what makes us different to other species. The act of musicking, as a sociologist Christopher Small might term it, supports us in our understanding of who we are. Music can be a lifeline, a dynamic aspect of individuality, personality, and group identity. For many of us, music has a vital form of expression and communication at some points in our lives. As part of a broader category of music education, community music has a key role in the growth and development of active music making throughout the lifespan. Also, you know, we just have to reflect on Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that everyone has the right to participate in the culture of the community. So from this perspective, effective community music processes can be understood as ethical, a response to a call for social justice, commenting on issues of music education, gender, sexuality, pedagogy, opportunity, and policy. So sort of conceived through the lens of hospitality, the idea of community music is relational. And we need, in order to really develop that, we really need to create inclusive spaces. So for me, music as hospitality, music as creative participation spaces is really vital because it talks deeply to our own sense of humanity. Other things, if we're thinking about the future now, other things that I've developed is the International Centre for Community Music, which was my response, I suppose, from what I was seeing was a growing field. So I've created this centre. We've got some PhD students. We run some research projects. In fact, we're open to work with whoever would like to work with us. So it's so great that I'm speaking to you today. So if you're interested in doing other types of projects, please get in touch. One of the projects we're doing is this large-scale research project with Jeunesse Musicale International around ethno. There's these young people's music camps happening all around the world. Of course, that's problematic at the moment, but we are actually investigating the impact of creating these intercultural spaces for music making. So let me finally end with this piece of text. To some extent, community music as a means of achieving inclusive music education within a framework of hospitality is made from the stuff of dreams. However, this is not a dreaming about what will never be, an aimless wander of the mind towards utopian ideals or a place of pure plenitude. This is not a dream of pure non-violence, which is an impossible dream, but rather, as American philosopher John Caputo might say, the dream of the emergence of something different, something that disturbs the sleep of the rule of the same. When the dream of pure plenitude is dispelled, the way is open towards a new dream, a chance to dream provocative and evocative thoughts. Instead of a frivolous activity, dreaming becomes an affirmative opportunity to exert a passion for the impossible, a lens to see in and between, over and beyond. It may be a truism that people who dream often ask questions that have perhaps not been considered before. They are often optimists, constantly asking, why not? The why nots are defiant, always challenging those who suggest something cannot or should not be done. Community music projects have often been established by asking this type of question, and there often lies a deep belief amongst community musicians that nothing happens until somebody invites you to dream. As a strategy for dreaming, community music manifests through the call and the welcome, which in turn releases a sense of responsibility between community musicians and the participants. However, because the type of dreaming I'm trying to evoke, community musicians become community music becomes an affirmation both ethically and politically. The transition from blue sky thinking to decision must inevitably be made and is not to be wild and a blind leap or choice, but a necessity to act inventively, a judgment without guardrail, a movement and decision towards the sphere of community without unity, a threshold to cross. It is through a faith in a dream, a passion for what I cannot know but might dare to imagine, that a certain political force is united, enabling a welcome towards those that call. Through the approaches of practice and general dispositions towards music making that promote people, places, participation, inclusivity and diversity, community musicians challenge us to dream of a politics of and for a musical future that is marked with active and meaningful participation. This dream is not a politics of sovereignty, of top-down power, but rather a politics that builds from the bottom up and is marked by impromptu improvisations, maddening refrains, and risky moments of discord. Invention is the breaking in, the incoming of something unforeseeable, and, like the journey of music creation, the political aspirations of community music require a faith in the process. It is not a matter of becoming what you are already, but rather becoming something new. So thank you very much for listening to this. And I hope it's been touched upon and responded to the call of this event. And maybe I will see you soon. Thank you very much.